Necesitaremos caballos y carros aquí, aquí.
No, tenemos explosivos. Ataquemos esta noche la prisión.
Sí, claro, ya de paso volamos la mansión del gobernador, que total es un símbolo de la opresión.
Me gusta.
One of the most important and enduring ways to see if a Zorro story will endure the test of time is how good its cast is. Some of the best Zorro stories, like the legendary Disney Zorro and New World Zorro shows, are hard carried by their ingenious casting choices and actor synergy. Movies like The Mask of Zorro would not have hit as hard without Antonio Banderas and Anthony Hopkins and their dynamic as master and pupil. And this show would be nowhere near as good without the amazing actors and actresses in this show, both individually and with their interaction with each other. Due to the astonishing amount of talented people that are involved in this show, I'll be creating subsections to this part, dedicated to the actors and their characters I feel like deserve special attention. Starting with...
Es terreno sagrado. Jesús ha hecho a los mercaderes del templo latigazos. Yo solo sigo su ejemplo.
Okay, so one of the first details of this entire show coming out was that the titular character would be played by Spanish veteran actor Miguel Bernardão, primarily known for his roles in shows like Elite or 1899. Upon seeing the casting choice for him, many people were genuinely surprised, and not all of them in a good way. Most other Zorro actors have always had jet black hair and a more handsome face, but Miguel Bernardão is more blonde and pretty. Now, I certainly don't mind that at all, but a lot of people were thinking, how is he going to play a good Don Diego? But by the time the show released, a lot of people have completely turned around for him, as his portrayal of Diego is one of the most three-dimensional, vulnerable portrayals that we have seen in the franchise. But a lot of his detractors don't realize that Miguel Bernardão is coming from a long list of actors cast to be Zorro because they are what the current audience considers to be attractive. In 1920, many women found short, little funny guys like Douglas Fairbanks attractive. In 1940, they invented bisexuality with Tyrone Power, and Alain Delon was literally considered a sex symbol in his film career, way before he was casted to be Zorro.
What?
One of the biggest appeals for Bernardão in my generation is that we find him exceptionally pretty. My type in men has always been more picky than my types for women, and pretty much every other Zorro actor hasn't really made me feel the same feelings previous actors have made people in their generations feel. However, this new show went from no Zorros I find attractive to two Zorros that I find attractive to. And judging by how many people in my generation who have seen this show, I'm not alone in this boat. A lot of Gen Z people like pretty cute men over suave handsome ones, and I'm no exception. Obviously, being a good actor is more than just looks. In this case, Miguel Bernardão excels at playing this new, more unique version of Don Diego. While some purists tend to not approve of the different direction Secuoya Studio took in the direction of the character, I for one absolutely love it. This is one of the few versions of the character to have a real solidified arc. One of the arcs that genuinely really mirrors like Antonio Banderas' Zorro. He's very similar to that character, and I mean that in the best way possible. The major part of Miguel Bernardão's Zorro arc that mirrors Antonio Banderas is their quest for revenge after the death of a family member. However, there is a major difference between the two. Murrieta's arc was learn how to be Zorro from Hannibal Lecter and take your revenge in as cool and flashy a way as possible. Revenge is fucking cool.
You're doing well. Not bad at all.
But one of the things that I noticed about Miguel Bernardão's Zorro is that while he wants to avenge his father, that's what starts his journey, it's nowhere near the main motivator for him by the time the credits roll for episode 10. Well, I'll get more into it for the plot and themes. I will say for now that Diego's evolution from vengeful vigilante to selfless hero of the people is done way better than in Mask of Zorro, and Bernardão plays an incredibly three-dimensional, vulnerable Don Diego, who wears his emotions on his sleeve. His good nature is constantly wrestling with his wants and desires, and he's constantly unsure of himself. He falls, he gets hurt way more than any other version of Zorro in the character's history, making the audience fear for his safety often in ways that you don't for Guy Williams or Duncan Regia. Even when interacting with other characters such as Bernardo or May, he is uniquely open around them. While Diego has always been more emotionally available than many other heroes of his time, this version takes it above and beyond. This version of Diego is constantly hugging and affirming those around him. Hell, he's even the guy who'd probably give Nalin a hug after everything that she's been through. And speaking of Nalin...
Debería arrancarte la piel y enterrarte en la mina por haber tratado a mi gente como esclavos. Pero no tengo tanto tiempo.
Okay. There is so much I need to say about this character that I think I'll wind up making a whole new video in the future about her arc, her character, and motivations. But for now, I think I'll cover the basics on her and the incredible performance from Dahlia Giacoaro. First of all, the concept for Nalin is genius. I listed off a few ideas in one of my older videos on how to make a more compelling antagonist for Zorro to fight, and one of the ones I didn't list was him fighting a mirror version of himself, someone who dresses and fights similarly to him, but fights against him for whatever reason. Secuoya Studios chose to do this for Nalin, and it makes her the most compelling antagonist in Zorro history, and one of my favorite characters in the franchise. A dark reflection of the ideals and beliefs inherent to Zorro, a version of the hero with none of the optimism of Don Diego, merely a vengeful vigilante out for blood. A Zorro that doesn't move past the initial lust for revenge like Branderas or Bernadou's Zorro, but one who fully embraces it, becoming the first time, and probably the last, we'll ever see an anti-hero or even full-on villain Zorro. Dahlia Giacoaro plays a character opposite to Miguel Bernadou's Zorro. While he is vulnerable, open with his emotions, and witty, Nalin is played completely straight. Nalin is motivated by grief and revenge like Diego, but unlike him, it almost completely consumes her. She rarely jokes or smiles like Diego, and while she is shown to care about those working with her or the people she fights for, she never gives them the same level of love and affection her rival Zorro does for the people in his life. Nalin is also far more brutal than Diego, and while many of her kills are deserving, there's also many who aren't. I've seen a lot of people recently advocate for a more brutal, bloody version of Zorro, and while I don't think it would work for classic Don Diego, for Nalin it is incredibly visceral and satisfying to see on screen. If it weren't for the PG-13 level of violence in the show, Nalin would be hacking people's limbs off and tearing them apart. She also commands a host of Native American warriors loyal to her, who break off from their tribe to fight for who they believe is the one true Zorro. While I've made Nalin sound like a pretty terrifying villain, she's anything but. Giacoaro's performance of Nalin, while very intense and terrifying, is also dripping with grief and sorrow. In the beginning of the show, we see the death of the previous Zorro, Pullman Foucault, but we also see Nalin mourning his loss, as he was her brother. She wants to become the next Zorro to avenge his death, but the spirit who chooses the next Zorro, Kyoche, has other plans, and it deeply wounds and angers Nalin to the point where she breaks ties with her tribe and her own serpent god, Maiha, to become who she believes to be the true Zorro to honor her brother and fight Diego. While Diego ultimately proves himself as the better Zorro, Nalin very much has a right to be angry, as a rich white man with no knowledge of indigenous culture was chosen to be Zorro over her. While I want to talk more about Nalin later in this video and in a video of her own, I will say that her actress plays the role absolutely phenomenally, and the writers created a truly compelling, unique antagonist for Zorro to fight, and that my grievances with Zorro's Rose Gallery are finally fixed. Also, before I switch topics, oh my god, I have such a mad crush on Nalin. Like, both her and Diego in this show are insanely beautiful, and I actually have like butterflies on my stomach seeing either of them on screen. Not really relevant to the character or anything, I'm just very silly. Oh my god.
¿Estás bien?
Out of all of the main characters, Lolita is the one I feel like is kind of the weakest. Like, okay, she's a really solid character, and if she were in another Zorro show, she'd absolutely be a standout. But when she's surrounded by great characters, she just doesn't stand out as much. I feel like I'm being kind of mean, so I want to discuss a lot of her positives first. I absolutely vibe with a lot how she absolutely takes no shit from anybody. Not her parents, not Diego, not a CGI Panther, and certainly not Nalin, who she absolutely riddles with bullets along with many other characters throughout the show. Renata Notney does a phenomenal job in portraying the confident but deeply conflicted personality of Lolita, as well as her free spirit and unwillingness to hide who she wants to be. Her love for Monasterio feels genuine, and one of the only few soft spots for the character, as she opens up to him in ways she never does for anyone else. However, that is kind of my problem with the character. Outside of Monasterio, a lot of her interactions feel less dynamic than the rest of the cast. Diego and Nalin's flip-floppy rivalry is so fascinating to me, I literally made a ship name for him. His genuine camaraderie with both Bernardo and May is adorable, and his jealousy of Monasterio melting away into general respect are, if not complex, at least endearing to the heart. But Lolita's interactions often feel a little one-dimensional. It feels like she's constantly in not taking shit from anyone mode. And well, yeah, there's also Nalin who has that. She often suffers from her inability to open up, while Lolita is mostly just vibing for the entirety of the show. For someone who has an active role in their own life, Lolita seems to be the most passive character of them all. And while she's very interesting compared to the other Zorro love interests...
This is boring! You're boring! You are so boring!
Compared to her own castmate, she stands out the least, which really bums me out. Considering how the final episodes for Season 1 have gone through, I feel like that'll change. And Lolita will probably be more active after all that's happened to her. Oh my god. I was not expecting anything about how they handled Monasterio in this show. And I mean that in an entirely positive way. Since 1957, the name Monasterio was known by Zorro fans everywhere as the embodiment of pure cruelty and evil in the franchise. Every one of his appearances only accentuates it more and more, with him constantly being portrayed as the grumbling, scheming, wrathful, and abusive dictator of Los Angeles, a shining example of everything wrong with the oppressive system Zorro fights against, but also kind of generic.
Nothing shall stop me from being the richest man in all of California.
That's it?
Like most other villains after 1957, are inspired by him in some way, and being the blueprint has the double-edged sword of being the most flat of the Zorro villains. But the show absolutely throws everything out the window with what we thought we knew of Monasterio, or of the trope of the evil Capitan as a whole. Emiliano Zorrita plays an absolutely wonderful, endearing, and lovable version of the character, a huge twist on the typical Zorro formula. While other Capitans are motivated by pure greed or a desire to feel more powerful than everyone else, Monasterio is motivated by a genuine sense of community and patriotism, which makes him feel very sympathetic, but also dangerous, as the real villain, Governor Pedro Victoria, can use and bend his morals for his own nefarious purposes.
Kill him. Kill him now.
I shouldn't.
Do it.
It makes him an incredibly nuanced and morally gray character, and whenever he comes in conflict with the other characters, you worry for his safety just as much as the protagonists. Another facet of his character is that, unlike other Zorro stories, he is the one with the main love interest. Well, Diego spends most of the show chasing around Lolita, and she ultimately prefers Monasterio, a far cry from his original appearance, where he's considered repulsive to every woman he comes in contact with, and also Garcia.
Well, is this so difficult to understand? Look at me, Sergeant. You find me attractive?
No.
Monasterio and Lolita have a genuinely really sweet romance, with my favorite moment of theirs being in episode 3. Lolita makes a half-joke, half-serious comment that she'll marry Monasterio if he completes his task of capturing Zorro. Everyone else around at the table chastises Lolita and calls her unladylike, but Monasterio actually defends Lolita by telling her he accepts that as a challenge, protecting her from everyone else's scorn, and also giving their relationship more motivation than it already had. This was the moment he won her and simultaneously me over to their relationship. I'd like to talk more about Monasterio, but it involves spoilers, and I am gonna save that for a later portion of the video.
The time has come to meet the Creator.
Huh?
With the main 4 characters out of the way, I'd like to address the rest of the characters. And while I won't devote as much time with them, I will say every actor did a phenomenal job with their performance, and I have something positive to say about pretty much every single one of them. Out of every version of Bernardo in the Zorro franchise, Paco Tuce plays the most wholesome, caring, and emotionally intelligent version of him. Bernardo serves the same role as he normally does, but what diverges is his vulnerability around Diego and May. While he is capable of being really funny like previous versions, Paco Tuce is a physical comedy actor after all. He's first introduced heartbroken and in tears over Don Alejandro's death, and he is often providing emotional support to the other heroes as well as aiding in their fight against injustice. One character that particularly surprised me was the first Zorro before Diego, Pullman Quicura, played by Cristo Fernandez. This character by himself plays a pretty small role, only having around 13 minutes of screen time across 2 episodes, but the impact he leaves on several of the main characters lasts for the whole season. Not only does his death in the first 10 minutes of the show affect Naleen's arc, but is the catalyst of Diego's arc as well. Pullman Quicura is the blueprint for how both Zorros carry out their work, each of them taking different elements of him as inspiration, including basically splitting his arsenal between them. Overall, a pretty minor character, but a pretty badass and important one. Also, he's kind of handsome too. All 3 Zorro actors are so pretty in this show, oh my god. There was another character I was not expecting to join Zorro's quest for justice on the Nintendo DS, and that is Mei, played by Cha-Cha Huang. I absolutely love this character so much, and I'm so happy they added her. She is ridiculously funny, and her interactions with Diego and Bernardo are just very hilarious, as well as the times that she gets to interact with some of the other cast members.
She only speaks Chinese.
Nasty.
Her inclusion in the story is also really cool in getting a Chinese perspective, as the show explores the Chinese community in California, which has been around for a very long time. With how the season ends, I can't wait to see how she grows as a character and her interactions with Diego. In a similar vein, another character I find super interesting is the antagonist of Mei's arc, Senor Chang. He is a Chinese crime boss with his own private army, who kowtows to the Mexican rancheros on the surface, but uses it to gain more power for himself. He serves as a direct antagonist to Mei and is an indirect one to Diego. Yes, he can't directly hurt the guy, and he has to play his game trying to work around him. He was one of the archetypes I was talking about earlier in my Zorro villains video, and he essentially fits the role of the indirect fighter perfectly. Not every character is sunshine and rainbows, though. A character that disappointed me was Samael, the cold-hearted merc for hire recruited by Vanderveen to steal the De La Vega fortune. As a concept, Samael goes hard. A cold-blooded killer armed with a weapon that's not even supposed to exist yet, and running around smoking random civilians sounds like a blast of an idea for a Zorro villain. He's not a Zorro villain. No, like, literally, he doesn't get to fight Zorro. Yes, he uses his Colt Patterson in 1836. Funny enough, he uses it more than the first guy to have the weapon in this franchise. But he never once comes across Diego in his costume. And I really hope Season 2 fixes that, because I've already seen so many people make fun of this guy. There's a multitude of other characters that I need to see more of, like Lolita's mother, Ramirez, the Russians, and Mr. Vanderveen before I have full opinions of them. I like what they have so far, but outside of some spoiler stuff with some of their plot details, I don't have much to say about them. With the characters out of the way, I'd like to move on to